接下来即将进行本论坛的第一个专题讲座，讲题为“从全球角度看投资的下一步”。让我们欢迎主讲人贝莱德亚洲零售业务负责人莫达文先生。Please welcome Mr. Mooney.
谢谢，大家好。Thank you very much for that kind introduction. It's a real privilege for me to be here this afternoon representing BlackRock. You're going to hear a lot of interesting information and facts this afternoon from many learned and bright fellow colleagues, and we're looking forward to helping you understand options you can for your investing future. Before I talk a bit about some of my key messages today, in my introduction, I think someone made mention of that. I would mention that my surname in English, Mooney, sounds a bit like money. If only it were true. My Chinese name is Mo Da Wen, which has another meaning entirely, but not much to do with money. What I'm going to talk to you about this afternoon in the next 25 minutes, I hope is something that all of you can relate to. Think about it this way. I'm from an island. It's called Ireland. Ireland. It's a little bit bigger than Taiwan. And even though I work for one of the largest money managers in the world, I face the same investing challenges, I think, as many of you in this audience today. I have 3 children. I'm a very busy person. I have parents that are getting older. And I'm still trying to figure out for me, how do I make progress on my own investing journey? So this afternoon, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how BlackRock in Taiwan can help you with some options to navigate your financial future. And then later, after you've heard from some of my fellow colleagues, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the issues around the markets. So I hope you find my discussion interesting and helpful. Now, I mentioned that my talk is really based on this idea about practical. I hope that by the time I finish speaking on time, that you're going to have some practical ideas for your investing approach. For me, it's really about making what you hear from us at BlackRock actionable, that you can take action, that you can put some of these ideas to work. So we're going to focus on basically a couple of things to get going with in terms of questions. If we're going to start about thinking about investing options as we navigate these challenging markets, then perhaps we need to think about a couple of things to reset. One is, of course, what's your invest objective? 2, for you personally, what are the challenges you face with your investing right now? And 3, how can you simply get going and take care of this? And for us, why do we want to talk about these things? I'm going to use the metaphor today for investing in the concept of a journey. And we're all in a journey at different speeds in different ways. And I think ultimately we're all trying to focus on Mudidi, a destination. And I think for us, BlackRock, we want to make sure that how you figure out your destination is that we give you some ideas and paths to do that. So for many of you, your destination may be up close. For some of you in the audience, you may be a long way off where you want to get to. And maybe for some of you in the audience, you're not quite sure which way you should be going right now, because there's a lot of noise in the markets, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of coverage. You get advice from so many different people. How do you figure out the best route for your financial journey? And that's really what I want to talk to you about this afternoon. So think about some of those choices that you face in life, whether it's planning for retirement. For some of you, that could be quite close. For me, given the fact that I've got a long working life ahead of me, very far away. For some of you, maybe purchasing a home. And I think in places like Taiwan, that's becoming an even more challenging lifelong prospect. There is, of course, marriage, which is no easy ride. And finally, we got to think about saving for education. All these are challenges which I face in my investing journey, and many of you do too. The question, of course, is how do you get going to start to prepare for that? How good shape are you in? Now, at BlackRock, we've been working with Invest in BlackRock for almost 20 years. One of the things that we really want to do as we develop our business is understand what do real investors in Taiwan feel about their future. So every year we survey Taiwanese investors. In fact, we survey investors all over the world to get their feeling on how they feel about where they are on their investing journey. So one of the questions you always ask about is retirement, which is obviously one of the biggest themes, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the implications of that as we all grow older. The reality is, in Taiwan, people are very serious about retirement planning. And if I talk about all the countries in the world we work with investors, the attitude towards retirement investing in Taiwan is actually above average. No question. And that's been one out by thing. It's actually very, very impressive. And as I mentioned, how we know that is because of this global investment survey that we've undertaken. In addition, the next question we ask about is, if you're serious about retirement, how active are you about making decisions which affect your retirement? And again, in Taiwan, investors score way above the global average. So it's quite interesting. And again, this is based on real information that was survey was conducted here in Taiwan last October. We're seeing that above average interest in providing for retirement and above average on a global basis against developed markets like the United States and European countries, really strong engagement in taking active decisions. Let's dig a little bit deeper into some of those results. So we asked the question about investment objectives and around how people are prepared. And the readiness, the preparedness in Taiwan scores about 50%, which in comparison to the rest of the world is only 35%. So to me, that's a good indication of this level of engagement around thinking around retirement. I mentioned this whole concept of being active about investing. Do you regard yourself as an active investor? And in the survey, 42% of Taiwanese scored themselves in this category, as opposed to 22% globally. So there is a contrast here, though, because despite the fact that people are thinking about retirement, and despite the fact that many investors in Taiwan are actively taking investment decisions, many of you are very worried about the decisions you have to make. Where is the happy ending to the story? So I think what I'd like to kind of summarize it, although many investors in Taiwan are preparing and on a journey, many of you still feel concerned. You feel worried. And clearly this journey of investing is not a straight line. It's going to have bumps. It's going to be challenging. But many of you who've been investing through investment markets the last 5 or 10 or 15 years will have experienced quite unprecedented volatility and challenges. So it's been a very challenging time to do this. Let me put this another way to you. Here's an interesting statistic from our survey. According to our survey, 60% of Taiwanese investors feel it's even harder to retire compared to 5 years ago. To me, that's quite a hard-hitting statement. It really communicates this challenge that we face, which is we know we need to do something, we know we have actions to take, but we feel worried. And the question, of course, is why? And I'm going to outline 3 challenges which are facing investors right now in Taiwan, and also give you some practical suggestions around how we believe you can overcome them. So first and foremost is this concept of inflation, which I know many of you are aware of, and it has become a major challenge in Taiwan. The chart on the left goes back 20 years, and as you can see in the good old days, when we were all a bit younger, taking decisions around these kind of investing options were easier, primarily because interest rates were a lot higher, and were certainly higher than inflation, and therefore you were getting real returns on your money. But over the last 20 years, the situation has dramatically changed, not just in Taiwan, but across the investing world. And we're now in a situation, if you look on the right-hand side, where, and I'll use the word official inflation figures, and I think they generally tend to be a little bit underestimated, so the true inflation rate is probably even higher. But we know what the official interest rate and deposit rates are. And really what this is saying is something that many of us know, is that having too much of your money in cash, in effectively deposits, can be a danger for your long-term savings, particularly given the current environment between interest rates and inflation. At the same time, what we're not saying is you move away from cash, but I think the proportion of money people have in cash should be balanced, and I'll come back on that point. So, if we hold in our head that inflation is a challenge compared to low rates, and then we look at where rates have been in general, where people have looked at safer investments, particularly in the area of fixed income, bonds and so forth. And again, it's a global phenomenon, is that yields have come down dramatically. So what that basically has meant is that people have been searching for income and yield, but the traditional sources of income and yield have been coming down. Not only that, with interest rates and bond yields in particular at pretty much lows, multi-decade lows, many investors around the world have got huge exposures to fixed income, which, if rates rise, will affect the value of those bonds. And I think in a world where many investors have been scared away from investing in equities and stocks, have moved to safety in bonds and cash, that's clearly been a sensible decision to make for the short term. But in the long term, we really need to think about how we make money go to work. So you could be saying, oh, okay, that's really easy. Then put all your money in the market. And of course, that's not easy either. And many of you in this room are active investors who allocate different parts of your portfolio to buying stocks. And clearly the return potential in equities has been higher, and as you can see over in the far right, 9% average return over a longer term basis is a very, very good real return. But the intra-year volatility and change has been quite dramatic, and therefore that makes an active decision around when to pick an entry point in markets to be quite difficult. So sounds like I'm not saying a lot of nice, happy things so far. And then there's one last thing which makes this investing challenge for all of us just that little bit harder. And that's this chart here, which just shows the benefits of a better life means that we're all living longer. And that's a blessing, and it's also a curse. Now, I'm very happy that I hope that I have a long and healthy life. I skipped 2 courses at lunch so that I could live that bit longer. I think about my health. But on a serious note, people who are moving into retirement now have the benefit of thinking about a retirement life of 25 or 30 years. It's quite dramatic. Our chairman and CEO, Larry Fink, has said longevity, the concept of living longer, is probably the most fundamental challenge facing the world today, is how are we going to prepare for this? For all of you here in the room, it's probably good news, is the fact you're going to live longer. Yeah, I'm 42 years of age. I hope to live probably for another 45 to 50 years. Maybe not so good for my children who are going to have to look out after me when I can't tie my own shoes. But that's really another challenge in terms of how long we need to invest to get our money to work. So what does all this mean if we think about all these different dynamics of inflation versus low rates, the risk of cash, the challenge of timing the markets, and the challenge of living longer? I promised you that I'd try and give you some practical ideas around how you can put your portfolio to work. And I think the first thing we think about, of course, is, as we all have annual health checks, check your portfolio. How's it looking today? Is it a collection of hot funds that you bought from year to year? Or is it a pretty well-balanced portfolio? Is the amount of risk that you're taking actually related to your investing horizon? We can help you. One thing, of course, we need to think into account is this whole concept of the balanced portfolio and where we go from there. So do you have a balanced portfolio for your needs? Are you very concentrated in cash? Do you have a very, very big exposure to high yield bonds? How well diversified is your portfolio? And how resistant would it be to some shocks if markets were to take a tumble? And again, we'll talk more, I'm sure, about the state of the markets in the panel later on. You'll also hear from some of my economist colleagues on that. I think the purpose of me being here this afternoon from BlackRock is to get you thinking about some of these more fundamental ways in which you look at your own portfolio and how you balance your risk and rewards. And ironically, for many of us, the challenge may be we're taking too little risk in our portfolio given the amount of time that we have to invest for. So when we talk about this concept of a balanced portfolio, what we're not saying is something that stays the same. And to use my metaphor of moving on this life's journey, what we're really talking about, that's me in the corner, by the way, when I'm 90, that's this whole concept of the portfolio will evolve over time. Perhaps having more exposure to riskier assets at the beginning and then gradually changing over time. The chart makes it look so easy. Of course, in reality, it's far from this simple. But I think you understand that what we're trying to sort of say to you is you should be active about how you're looking at your portfolio, checking it regularly, and making sure it's balanced for the market conditions that you're in. Now, there are many, many ways in which financial institutions and money managers can help you with that. Let me give you a couple of examples. So, I mentioned earlier on about this concentration in certain funds and certain asset classes. And again, we've been doing business in Taiwan for 20 years, and I can tell you, when you can see in the industry, many, many investors are heavily exposed in Taiwan to fixed income, to high yield funds and such like, which is fine because it's giving an income. The challenge is how concentrated are your portfolios in one or two different types of funds? How diversified is it? And I can tell you again, without giving away too much information, we have seen in our business over the last couple of years very little flow into equities. Understandably, clients and investors were very badly shaken by the financial crisis of 2008, and many have been very reluctant to move back into markets in a meaningful way. And many investors, of course, have missed the subsequent rally and return. So there's clearly, in some instances, this concept of an imbalance in portfolios. And what we want to try and understand is how can you address those challenges I've talked about, such as low interest rates and inflation? How can you get income and growth from your portfolio to keep you on track for your goals? How can you diversify your portfolio and yet keep your volatility under control? And I think as long as you're prepared to respond to these challenges in a way and with some good advice, we think you'll be much better prepared to reach your destination when you embark on that journey, continue your journey. So some suggestions that we have from our perspective around how you can consider this as a recap. One, although every investor's situation will be different in terms of your time horizon and your risk profile, in the main, we do feel that most investors should have an increased exposure to equities, even with markets where they are today. Primarily driven by the need to have a balanced portfolio. Higher quality dividend-paying stocks will help generate that for you. And of course, you can do that in a way where you can get into action as quickly as possible. Not only that, of course, in the market today, aside from designing your own portfolio, there are many diversified funds which give you access to equities, bonds, cash, and other instruments all in one fund. And that makes the decision around where you put your portfolio to work a lot easier. So there are many creative solutions out there. At BlackRock, as I mentioned, we love to help. Our mission is definitely to better the financial futures for our investors. We have a very long track record of investing around the world. It may be mentioned, we are the largest money manager in the world. I think for us, the size is not the important topic. The important issue for us is how well covered we are around the world, helping investors all over the planet. We have the resources, and we certainly are built for the capabilities of the world where we are today. And that's really our ultimate mission. We are independently owned. We're not owned by a bank or insurer. Every single dollar that we manage is for investors. So there are no conflicts of interests. We're a truly global enterprise in that regard. So you know you've got the backing of the scale and the breadth of our capabilities. In addition, I mentioned this concept of trying to understand where investor needs are. And again, for those of you who are interested, we've got lots of information that we can share about this. But we spend a lot of our time trying to understand how real investors feel about their investing challenges and helping design portfolios and products which help meet their needs. So this is an example of work we've been doing around the world where we interviewed tens of thousands of people to understand the challenges facing investors today. Not so we can sell you more product per se, but more so we can help make sure that our products are best designed for you. And that's why, for example, here in Taiwan, we've conducted that survey with over 1,000 investors last year. If you'd like to find out more, there's a booth outside with more information on BlackRock. We have a lot of resources available online in terms of how we can help give you better information and better access to what's going on in the world of investing. And we'd be delighted if you take some time to read that. So, to recap, there are many challenges for us in the world today when it comes to investing. You'll hear more about those challenges in the markets later on in the panel. What I really wanted to help you with today was take a step back, taking a look at your portfolio and understanding, is it rightly balanced for your needs today? And understand where you need to take some risk. We believe that means increasing modestly your exposure to equity and going for higher quality. And certainly, we think we've got other capabilities which we can give you more information on at another time. So that really concludes my remarks for now. Thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to taking some questions later on at the panel. And I hope that by following the suggestions that we made today, it will help you keep you on track for your MOODD as well. Thank you very much. 谢谢.
Thank you, Mr. Mooney, for the impressive presentation.